I'm Richard H. Weber from Ackworth, Georgia, and it was in 1944 that I went into the service, and I came out in August 46. It was on December 7th, we got home from church, turned on the radio, and we heard that Pearl Harbor was bombed. And my mother right away thought, she said, "Oh my, you might have to go into the service." But I was as skinny as a toothpick, weighed 118 pounds at 5'11", and when I was in for my physical, they said I passed 100%, and they just put down underweight. And that's why I went into the Army Air Force, maybe because I was underweight, I don't know. But my friends, Franklin Gloss and Dan Brown, they went into two different branches of service, but neither one of them came back, sorry to say. So the Lord was with me, so I came back. Well, I never gave it much thought. I was helping my dad put in a cellar under our house. We had just raised it to put a cellar in, and I just was helping him working, and I had quit school to help him, and so I never thought nothing about it because I wasn't 18 at the time when it broke out, so I never gave it much thought. I know one thing, I never wanted to kill anybody. A friend of mine from church, he signed in conscientious objector, but I didn't want to do that. I said, there's always something for me to do. So I went into the service then as Army Air Force. Yes, well, I was drafted then, and we left Buffalo, New York on a train, and we arrived at Fort Dix, New Jersey at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they swore us in then into the service. And then they took us in the big room and had us take our clothes off and threw a bunch of old, I shouldn't say old, but they were too big for us, and gave us shots and so forth. And then we were shipped out to Shepherd Field, Texas. And there we took our basic training. But the problem there was, after the first basic training, we were supposed to ship to Madison, Wisconsin for radio school. But they said it was filled, so we had to take a second basic training, which I wasn't pleased about that. So then after the second basic training, the radio school still wasn't available, said you're going to take a third basic training. I said, that's for the birds. So I went to the headquarters there and I said, do you need anybody to type? Because I had typing after my first year in high school. They said, oh, can you type? Yes, good, we want you. So as they marched by, I was in there typing. And after basic training, then we shipped to radio school, Madison, Wisconsin, in the dead winter. It was so cold, I didn't like it, although from Buffalo it wasn't that big a change. But after radio school, then I had a 15-day furlough back to Buffalo. And then we shipped, when I was in the Army Air Force, I thought we'd fly every place, but we took a train every place we went. And we were 5 days in the yards of Chicago, sitting there in the train. And then we left and we headed for Salt Lake City, Utah. And of course, that was the old steam engines then, and the windows were open and our ears were filled with coal dust from these trains. But as we got to Salt Lake City, we were there for a couple days. And as you maybe know, there's a person called Kilroy that was in the service. Well, we found out that the mountain behind the capital of Salt Lake City, we climbed that one Sunday afternoon, and Kilroy wasn't there, so we put him there while we were up there. And from Vancouver, Washington, we were there for a few days, and we went to up to Portland, Oregon, and so forth. But then it was ready to ship out. Well, we got aboard the ship, and as we went out to Vancouver city there, it took us, well, let's see, the first 5 days of that boat trip, I was sick as a dog, seasick. And of course, I was down in the second or third hull of the ship, and it smelled like anything. They were throwing up in their helmet liners, and so I slept up on the deck. But I was sick for 5 days, so we landed at Hawaii, and we were there for a day or two, and then shipped out. We didn't know where we were going, because my mother received letters with some of the words taken out. and I didn't know where we were going. But we were 17 days on that ship, and then we arrived at Saipan, which we didn't know at the time, and that was in the early morning hours. They had just taken Saipan almost a year before, because when we actually landed on Saipan with our landing craft, because we had to anchor out farther, then we went along the shores, and there was a lot of, even some dead bodies yet. In fact, I have a picture of a skull I picked up on the shore, and I got a picture of it with my memoirs. And but that's how we got to Saipan. And when we got to Saipan, they said, we don't need radio operators, we need teletype operators. So they gave me a 2-week course in teletype, radio and landline teletype. We had 10 CW operators, that's the Morse code. We also had 10 landline and about 10 radio teletype. And of course I was on the teletype, both radio and landline. And then of course after I got my corporal stripes, then we shipped to Marcus Island. Well, I hadn't flown a plane up until that time. And so on Saipan, there was a Navy pilot, and he took us up in this 2-engine plane. I don't know what kind of plane it was, but the tail end was overloaded, and he didn't have a co-pilot, and he didn't have a watch on, and I had a watch, and he said, you sit up in the co-pilot seat. So I sat in the co-pilot seat, and he yelled back, he said, throw some of that stuff out of the tail won't lift, and we're heading for the bloody ridge of Saipan, taking off from there. So we took off, and I said, where are we going? We're going to Marcus Island. Well, where is that? That's just east of Iwo Jima. Okay, as we were flying, and he said, well, we're going to land. I said, where is it? He said, it's down there. And it was only 1 mile long and 3/4 of a mile wide without a tree on it, just white coral rock and some bushes. Well, we landed on there, and I met the Gomkowski twins from Buffalo. They were tower operators, so we worked in the radio room there, and the Japanese had a room, a radio room, 2 stories, well, about 1.5 stories down into that white coral rock. And we went down there, and I found this Japanese bayonet, and I brought that home. I have it in my study. I use it once in a while, giving illustrations at schools. We were there for, just about 3 months, maybe 2 months, and then we flew to Guam. And when we were to Guam, and I got my sergeant stripes there, I was in charge of the radio station there. And so that was, the main thing was sending messages to Eniwetok and Wake and the other islands, and then we'd receive messages back. So that was my second Christmas away from home, and but we had a great time in spite of it all. And I met another Christian fella, and we went up into the hills of Saipan when I was there to pray, and when we turned around, it says, keep out, beware of Japs. So we got out of there because the Japs were still around. In fact, they captured quite a few, a dozen or so, behind our tent one morning before I got up for breakfast. The only job I had really as far as the Japanese was guarding them. I had my .45, and we'd guard them. This was even after the war. And some of those didn't in fact, there was someone that surrendered not just a couple of years ago on one of the islands. He didn't know the war was over. And they found that he gave up then, and that's what happened over there. There was a lot of destruction there, and of course we had to get used to the showers, which was 3 tins around a circle with a 50-gallon drum over the head, and we took showers as the gooks went by. We called them gooks at the time, but it was for an 18-year-old, because that's what I was when I hit Saipan. It was never away from home. That was something that was new to me. My mother used to send packages. I remember the package she sent for Easter with chocolate, and it was all melted together in the straw, but the guys surely made use of that and got rid of it quickly. As far as the service, I'm glad I was in. For one thing, I only had 2 years of high school when I quit, when my dad had a stroke. And when I was in Shepherd Field, Texas, of course I was a Christian fella, but I prayed under the covers and read my Bible when no one was around, real witness. But then I called it my upper room. I went up there, I spent 3 hours with the Lord, and He called me into the ministry while I was there. And I said, well, Lord, how can I do that? I only had 2 years of high school. So I started taking some correspondence courses from Moody Bible Institute from Chicago. But then when I got home, after I got discharged from New Jersey, and I got to Buffalo, when I got discharged, I got to Buffalo about 3 in the morning. So I laid on the bench up in the New York Central station, and then I got out, got a taxi to my home, and my dad always had a beautiful garden. And as I walked in, I saw the sign, "Welcome home, Dick," and so forth. It was a thrilling experience after being gone a full 2 years. Hiroshima, some of them call it, to see what the atomic bomb did. Of course, a lot of it was fixed already, but they had the buildings that had melted glass and flesh in it and so forth. They had that all on display in the museum. So it was something to think about, but really, a lot of people were against that atomic bomb. Now, they took off with the atomic bomb next to us in Tinian, which was a big B-29 base, actually larger than Saipan as far as B-29s. And we did more damage in Japan with our firebombing than we did with the atomic bomb, because those villages were just shacks, a lot of them. And thousands, in fact hundreds of thousands, were killed, burned, the whole villages, where the atomic bomb hit in one city, and it killed a lot of people, but it saved us from going to Japan at the time, and it saved thousands of lives. And I can thank the Lord for that, because we were headed there, Yes, the Gomkowski twins, they were from Buffalo, and I first met them in Saipan, and then they flew to Marcus Island with me. They were tower operators. And I never was in a tower until they were in Marcus Island. And I know one night we went up, I was in the station, and it was slow, so I went up to the tower, and we went to the dining hall and got a couple of big inch-thick steaks, and we grilled them up there in the tower, and I didn't realize it. When I saw a plane come in, I thought they were going to take the tower, because they're right next to the runway. It's first experience for me in the tower, and I sort of ducked. Wow, that's going to hit us, and they sort of get a kick out of it. And I met the Gomkowski, one of them died, and when I was up to Buffalo, I go up every year, about 4 years ago, I saw that they were in Buffalo. I looked them up, and Walter was in the hospital. Walter was one of my friends. They always used to take their baths in the ocean instead of around the bend. But I saw him, and now he's gone too. But I got a Christmas card from his wife yet this year. When those Japanese were captured behind my tent, I thought, well, that's pretty close. And then, of course, I used to guard them in the mess hall with my .45. One never knows. I didn't want to kill anybody, but like the old saying is, it's either him or me. And I don't think I would have had, maybe I probably would have aimed for his leg, I don't know, so not to kill him. But I didn't have to do that. And I had other guys around me. There was other working around in the kitchen when I was watching them. And then with the war over at the time afterwards, why, we didn't have to worry too much about it. The funny part of it is when I took basic training, this you might get a kick out of, the Air Force didn't cut your hair as short as the Marines. And we had to crawl under 18 inches of barbed wire during our basic training, and then they shot tear gas at us while we were under there, and we had to put our gas masks on under there. And I did, but a strand of hair stuck out, and gas got in my mask, and I was choking to get out of that thing. So that was one of the scary, it's just tear gas, but that was a new experience for an 18-year-old. Well, we were in a small community called Bellevue, that's the name of it, Bellevue in New York. Everybody was happy, of course, because I wasn't the only one coming home. There was other ones, Rosenberg down the street, and then there was quite a few that didn't make it. Like I said, Franklin Gross and Danny Brony, we used to skate on his pond all the time. We'd look out our window, and if there was a fire going, we know we could go down and skate. And that was Brony's pond. Well, he didn't come back. And Franklin Gloss, as kids, I broke his arm one time. We were wrestling. I was taking nails out of lumber for my dad, and he was horsing around, so I stopped working, and we start wrestling, and I threw him down, and his arm, instead of going this way, it went that way. And so I quick put it back. I quick put it back, and he told his mother he fell on the sidewalk. Well, she found out differently, and my mother, she found out, and I got punished for it. But he never came back, old Franklin. Well, depends what you mean typical. Of course, basic training was all typical. Everything the same, regimented, you know. But over there, like at Christmas time, we wanted to celebrate Christmas. So we didn't have a Christmas tree, but we found an old pump organ. I don't know where it came from. And there was an old vacuum sweeper there. And I could play. I'd play sometimes. And they'd say, Weber, play some for us. Well, we hooked up this vacuum sweeper with wires to the keys of this organ and put the vacuum underneath the floor. And so we play the organ, Christmas carols. And of course, we also had one fella from Wisconsin. He was called my Judas, one of my disciples, they called him, because he got drunk Christmas Eve, and he said, Weber, one of your disciples drunk over there, you better go to the PX and talk. So I went over there, and I said, oh, Fred Hermes, his name was. I said, Fred. And I said, we'll pray for you. I went back. Next morning he said, it's a good thing you didn't fight with you. I was ready to fight you. Little things like that, you know. But I got along good with the fellas. They got mad at me because I didn't believe in drinking and smoking. I still don't. I never had it. And when I'd get my rations, my C rations, and then I'd get cigarettes, and I'd crumble them and throw them away. And my beer, I dumped out. They didn't like that. I said, well, if it's poison to me, it's poison to you. I went into the service thinking I'd be an architect. But then when I had that upper room experience, and the Lord called me to preach. My uncle was a preacher. At the age of 5, I had chicken pox and measles, and I can still see the room. They pulled the shades out. I had to have darkness in there. And the doctor said, I can't help him. I don't know whether he'll live or not. But I had a praying grandmother. When she prayed, she never got a busy signal. She got a direct line to heaven. And my mother the same way. And she told me afterwards that she thought I would be called to preach. That was at 5 years old. I didn't know this until I got into this ministry. So when I went into the service, that changed my life, knowing I was going into the ministry. And I had what I called navigator scripture verses that I'd memorize while I was in chow line. I was always in the chow line and so forth. But and the funny part of it, when it was time to take your gun drills, I was on sick bay when they were instructing us on the machine gun. So when it was time to try out, I thought I was Dick Tracy. I took my gun like Dick Tracy. I said, hey, you don't. I said, well, I wasn't there when you instructed us. But I was better on the pistol than I was with the rifle. But that's one of the things that they caught me on. Well, for one thing, I was lucky. I was raised in a strict German home. My dad was strict, and we took orders. I saw one fella get his teeth almost knocked out for disobeying. It was very easy for me. Although we knew the jargon, today we need a truck driver. Who wants to be a truck driver? Well, we learned not to raise our hand because that was a wheelbarrow. We learned that you've got to know their language. And so we didn't volunteer for truck driving because you knew that. But I think the whole experience, I'm thankful for it. I think I grew up fast because never away from home, always, you know, in our neighborhood. And I think, and everybody, for some reason, looked up to me. as they do veterans even now. But they looked up to me. Even though my sister was 2 years older, she looked up to me. My brother looked up to me, and my folks did. And I was the first one to go to college. So it was a whole new experience, because I didn't ever think I was going to go to college, you know, but the Lord made a way, because the GI Bill put me through. I was thankful for that. Another highlight would be living with a bunch of men. That was a new experience, because I can't stand snoring. And the first time in Texas, when I was with 30 guys in that barracks, the guy next to me started snoring like mad. So I got up and I squeezed his nose and quick jumped back in the bed when he gulped. I don't think he knew I did it. But those were experiences. And then another thing, I'll never forget the lavatories on the ship going over. That killed me. That's why I still get up early in the morning. I was always the first one in the bathroom, because all it was a tin trough with 2x4s, and you sat on those. And whoever's ahead of you, they went underneath you. You know what I mean? And I had to get used to that, an 18-year-old guy. And so I got up early. I was ahead of all of them. And that I'll never forget that. That's an experience. As a Christian fella, I was 18. As a Christian fella, when I went into the service, I was looking for companionship with my type of thoughts as far as Christianity was concerned. And I found that in Texas. And when I got to Saipan, I didn't know how that would work. And I was going to the latrine, restroom for other people. But when I was going to the latrine, I was whistling a gospel song. And this sergeant said, "Oh, that's a gospel song. Are you a Christian?" I said, "Yes." And Elza Milner was his name. He had been to Moody Bible Institute before he went into the service. And he was there during the invasion. He was in, and he took me to his buddy that a grave was there. But I looked for that type of people, and this helped me. And I made my bed at both places. We made our bed out of 2x6s, and then we took B-29 inner tubes and cut them in inch strips and made them crisscross and put them on with bottle type caps, round caps, so the nails wouldn't pull out. And if we wanted a soft bed, we didn't pull them quite as tight. But that's how we made our beds. And then, of course, we had the tent that we lived in Saipan. We had finally had to worry about the monkeys. We'd wash our clothes and hang them on the line. They'd slide down our sheets and get them all muddy again. Or if we had the door open of our tent, they'd come in and steal gum or whatever you had, they'll steal it. And so we had to deal with monkeys. Instead of Japs, we dealt with monkeys. I try not to miss it. It's amazing. Now, I'll be to the one over here in Ackworth on Saturday, Memorial Day weekend. And it's amazing how few people turn out for it. They're out picnicking. That's a big picnic weekend. And a lot of people, even in the parades, they don't honor the flag. Some do. But a lot of the civilians don't honor the flag even. They don't put their hand on their chest when it's going by. And we like to salute, and we think a lot of that flag. I think the Supreme Court made a bad ruling when they called it figure of speech. That's not, they should not be allowed to burn a flag. And I'd fight it. I went to the World War II memorial in Washington. Our American Legion, they took us there. And I was very disturbed of Franklin Roosevelt's article on the wall. They left out, "So help me God." They left that off. I mentioned it to them. And I don't know who put that on, you know, so forth, but they had no reason to leave it off. But Washington, anything can happen. It was fantastic. I'd like to go again. I'd like to go again, but I can't walk far. But the rest of our comrades was with us from our American Legion. Some were in wheelchairs and so forth. But to see the magnificence of it, beautiful. I think it's the best one up there. Of course, I saw the Korean and so forth. I saw all of those. But and saw also Vietnam. That was another thing. They got a dirty rap anyway, Vietnam did. But it was a soul stirring. It brought tears to my eyes. And then to see that wall with all those stars of those that died, that touched you. I could have been on that wall, you see. And so I thank the Lord. He was with me all the way. Yeah.